Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the topic of grief. How does it affect our heart, our soul, our physical being, spiritual entity, our essence, and how are we existing in this world when our loved ones transition on, when those people leave us and we feel left alone, or perhaps we feel so distant and hurt by broken hearts, shattered dreams, and life's cut short way too quickly. Grief sometimes takes on so many different roles for so many different people. Some speed right through it and they say, oh, I'm good to go. I'm on to the next thing. I know it's all right. Others give it up to God and know that it's in His hands. Still others say, I'm still struggling with it. I don't know how to get through this. It's like an everyday existence, and I'm just stuck in a place that I know not what it is or how to navigate through. Grief takes on an individual, unique pattern. I think the idea is that there's not really a template out there. There's not any pills. There's no way that you could take a calendar, check off the days, and say, that's my end date, and have it go away. It's a process, and emotions. It brings up all kinds of things in your world. Your place in this world and your place outside of it. Today, my guest is Karen Johnson. Her book is Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So glad to have you talking about grief these days, because I think sometimes people will say they were cut too short, their lives have gone. And, I've always said on the show over the last 11 years is that truly our life is only guaranteed for today. So what's really cut short? Is it our concept of the story? Is it our human feeling like we have to have or be? Or is it just that we have this loss and we don't know how to verbalize it?
Yeah, those are all great questions. And I think if you can kind of change your perceptual state a little bit and think that, maybe their life was perfect just as it was. Mm-hmm. Maybe they did everything they came to do and needed to do, and that they now are on the other side having another experience. One thing I know for sure, dealing with my son Benjamin, is they're just across the veil. And even those that are fully crossed over on the other side, they're not, I always say they're not in jail. They're not in prison. They can come back and forth and visit. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if you can just look at it as a transition, a gateway, and a gateway for those of us left behind, too, to choose to live a different life. Not that we wanted to, not that we asked for it, but here it is right in front of us. And if you can see it as an opportunity for change and transition, it can change your entire perception.
Karen, can you tell us the story of Ben, your son, because that's where it all started for you when you started to say your world has gotten shaken up and it kind of came to a close of the world that you had created.
Yeah, so I had actually, I was a lawyer in Washington, D.C. and a judge, administrative law judge, and just kind of going along, knowing that my son was struggling, as many young men do, to establish a business, decide whether to go back to school, just various things, but nothing that I thought was totally serious. So I went on a vacation for a week to South Korea and got the call that nobody ever wants, and no parent ever wants, that he had died. and he had died of a heroin overdose. And I was completely in shock. I mean, maybe an accident I could have accepted or something, but a heroin overdose was just outside of my parameter. I don't believe he was an addict. I don't believe he tried before the ME, didn't find any other needle marks. I think what happened, according to the other guys that were there, was they just got drunk, decided they were going to try heroin, and they just gave him too much because he was a big guy, 6'8". And so he died almost instantly. And so Ben came to me when I was sitting in the airport in South Korea. It took me 24 hours to get home. You can imagine my desperation. 24 hours sitting there, and he came to me just like his physical self would, just walking right toward me, smiling, his big old grin, and then disappeared. And so I called frantically my ex-husband and said, I think he's alive. I think he's trying to get out of the refrigerator. You've got to call the ME. I think he's telling me that he's alive. And so the ME very kindly looked and said, I'm sorry, but he's gone. And but it was a beginning for me of a perception of life after death, that there really is life after death. There's more on the other side.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we have to hit these walls along in our life, especially in the past, I would say, 2 decades, where many people are now becoming more aware. They're becoming more open to their gifts and their abilities, and they're being able to know and see and sense spirits and want to seek out a path to be able to know that there's so much more other than what we grew up with, in the 50s and 60s with that kind of paradigm. I know for myself, before I was born, my mother was pregnant with me, and my sister had died at 6 months. And it had totally shifted over, because then when I was born, it wasn't that, there was never the me. I could never, I would look in the mirror and say, that's not me. Who is that? It's almost as if I had taken her soul was living on within me in some form or some control way. And I think sometimes when we look at that, we say, how do people who have passed on affect us? Or even those who were trying. My son had tried to commit suicide 13 times, And every single time he's so deeply and intensely connected to me, I would be like laying on the floor, 1,000 miles away, saying something's wrong, not knowing who or what or why. So I think the idea is that when we start to become very aware of the energy forms of our loved ones in this lifetime, the issues that they're having, of where they might be, or as they pass on, when they come back to us and still speak to us, that I'm sure is just as you are, as I am, over 60. We've all said, wow, we think we've been doing this all our whole lifetime. We just didn't recognize it. Do you think?
That's for sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that sometimes we start out, those of us that are in the over 60 crowd grew up at a time where things like this just weren't spoken about, spirits and on the other side and coming to visit, or fairies and all sorts of things. And if you did talk about it, my mother told me, don't talk about that. You're going to end up in a loony bin. That was the derogatory term at that time. And so don't tell anybody and stop that. Basically, stop that.
Well, it was called the Nut House at our time, because my grandfather worked at the Nut House at the top of the hill. Yeah. So, terrible. He was an orderly there, so we all knew we weren't going to go there because Grandpa worked there. So, yeah.
Right. So it wasn't accepted, it wasn't standard, and don't talk about it kind of thing. And so I think that helped many of us just to stamp it down. Don't even talk about these things. Don't even think about those things. And so I just wanted to really, when I was growing up, I was a reader. I read, and I wanted to become an archaeologist and travel all over the world. And my mother said, no, that's no good. That's terrible for women. In those days, I think there were no cell phones. There was no email. I mean, you were really somewhere. When I went to Afghanistan in 1984, there were just those little blue air mailer envelopes back and forth. It was very hard to place an international call. And so So, their recommendation to become a lawyer was safe and secure, and I bought into it, and I did all of that for 30 years.
Right. Well, it's almost as if we were spirits in waiting, more or less. In other words, we were to continue our work going along. Like, in other words, you probably, if you look back in your life in retrospect, you could say, I've got a lot of stories I could tell you, and now it's okay to tell you because they can start to come out. But in essence, truly it takes someone in our life or someone to take us to the next step, so to speak. I had this thought about your son. When I get the book, I set my hand on the book, and I was just taking a minute and just had a sense. And I said that your son truly wasn't taken from you in this life. Your son, he was a spirit form. He says, I'm going to go down and help that lady, and I'll be her son, and I will help her awaken. So in other words, if you can look at it from there, like the back end, he didn't come to you just as your son. He came from you because he already had the message that he was going to help you with the awakening, and he helped you through the process. So your dear knew what his ticket was.
Right. Oh, I so believe that. Because even when he was little, he never wanted to go away anywhere to camp or anything. He wanted to stay at home, and he didn't want to, school didn't interest him. And I said, honey, you got to, connect here. What are you going to do when you grow up? You need to do this. And he said, Mom, I'm not going to be here very long. I don't need to know all that stuff.
That's right.
And of course, he would say, no, don't even talk like that. That's not true, blah, blah, blah. I didn't have any context. But he was telling me, really, I think, the truth. Yeah.
I think that sometimes when we look back on the words that people speak or share with us, it's interesting when you say that about your son, because so many times, I've got all these letters and degrees behind my name, but at every single one of those letters came with a dean at a school, and they always said to me, you need to drop out, you don't belong here. And I went, what? Every single one did that. And I just kind of kept going through it, kept doing my process, and I always looked back and said, yes, I speak to spirits more than humans. I don't belong here, but I'm still here. So in essence, I think that's when you had to make your shift, too, from your job and your profession, knowing that, hey, got to stop somewhere, people, because it's not it. And don't you think that's when your wall hit, too?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and the wall hit and the door opened at the same time.
Yeah,
so
right.
I say death is the doorway. And sometimes it takes a big awakening, like a death or a diagnosis or a big loss of some kind, that we have to be thrown out of our daily lives. We have to be thrown out of the matrix and lie somewhere in a foreign territory going, where am I now? I remember trying to go back to work and nothing fit anymore. I didn't fit. I just didn't fit there anymore.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's almost as if you stand there and you're going, this is an altered universe. I know my husband says to me all the time, he says, you just got to come back to reality someday because you're just not going to make it this way. And I'm going, and I always say to him, I am not coming back to your reality. It means nothing to me, And don't you think that we could never exist back in that old paradigm? So, in other words, a lot of times people want to bring back the energy of the spirit of someone that's passed on back into the space and time that they're in, and then they get frustrated with it. And I call that chronic grief, because they really want to see, sense, hear, know, and bring back the story on the page they were on, yet they can't. Right?
Right. No, it's not possible. And moreover, I think my experience with Ben is that as we pursue our processing of grief and the journey of grief, it's not a one and done sort of thing. As we process our journey and go through our journey and become really awakened and reborn and create a new life out of the ashes of the old, we free them. They're not frantically around us. They watch, they see, they can experience what we're going through. And as we allow ourselves to heal, they too are freed on the other side to do the things that that are wonderful for them to do and experience.
Yeah, because I think sometimes people want to call them back in. Is he okay? What's his story? Did he go to, and they want to create a story so that the people that are left here, want to feel better or justified or validated or let off the hook or whatever you want to, so to speak. When in essence, if you could just see that it is a story, period, words on a page, turn the page and say, let it be, because then you're allowing their soul to be able to be free. I mean, I think people try to keep calling in the souls and the spirits, and that's when you end up with souls and ghosts in your house where you just can't get rid of them because they haven't fully transitioned because you keep calling them back in. You know what I mean? Because you keep wanting to tether them, yes?
Yeah, tethering, staying stuck. And our society gives conflicting information to us, too, because there's a no-win situation. If you don't grieve long enough, they say, boy, she sure got over that fast. And if you grieve too long, oh, she's just not doing well. She needs to move on. So we feel a lot of pressure, like how long is long enough, and is my sorrow and my extreme grief and creating a shrine out of my loved one's room, demonstrating to them and to others how much I love them. And it is just really absolutely the opposite of what they wish for us and want for us on the other side. They wish and want for us to go on and move on and create a new life so that they, too, can be free.
Well, I think also, too, the spiritual community, it really does a number on us, too, because, you could talk to somebody and they'll say, oh, you're still being triggered. You still have to do more work. When in essence, they might just be relaying a story because that's what they feel they wish to do. Because it's a door that helps them connect with whatever they're at. I think sometimes we get so stuck in judgment, and I think judgment is really the issue. Are we judging that they're human in spirit? Are we judging that we're right or wrong? Are we judging that we're broken and we're still stuck? There's a lot of this going on, yes? Yeah,
for sure. And that's why I developed 16 practices for people to sit in a ceremonial way. So sitting in a ceremonial way is like when you're in church and you're praying, and in this way you're sitting with a candle and a pie pan and pieces of paper, and you're writing down things. Who are you judging? Who is judging you? Maybe you're judging people around you that weren't there, weren't supportive, and you can write these names down and release them into the fire in a ceremonial way, with the intention of letting it all go. Also, all the stories. Many times the stories we are telling ourselves cause a lot of suffering. I should have done this. I could have done that. I was too permissive. I put him in the wrong school. I did that. So sitting and releasing these stories in a ceremonial way, we're getting out of our reptilian brain into our neocortex. And the neocortex is that level of ceremony where we get into the soul and where things move in a very light way without the heaviness of the physical realm. So sometimes we're telling people, there are many books that say, okay, now's the time you need to go on a date, or now's the time you need to go out to dinner or to a movie, and all these steps in the physical realm. And then people are wondering, why isn't it working? Why don't I want to do that? How come I can't get there? And the answer really lies in looking deeply into yourself and asking the deep, 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 meaningful questions that will guide you to where you're stuck and the things and emotions that need to be released before you can truly move on. And so this is sort of the before process. This is the process one needs to go through to go on this journey through grief, through rebirth, transition, resurrection, all these stages of this beautiful journey, and use the energy of grief to transform our lives.
In essence, grief is the loss of identity because you're no longer a mother, father, brother, sister, whatever. But in essence, if we look at the soul journey, it's also a loss of identity to where you lose that sense of, well, I'm not that job anymore because that's not what I was. I'm so much more. And you're almost into this abyss. What I call grief is just a tool to get you into the abyss, to be able to experience something more of yourself, period. Mm-hmm. And if we can see that the abyss, anything can take us there. Grief can take us there, pain, struggling, suffering, shame, guilt, whatever you want to call it. All of these things can take us there. And then when we get there, it's up to us to decide, just as you shared, you write down the stories and you release them. Then when you do that, you're done with that book, and it's close that book, and then you move to the next phase. So really, in essence, are we not, even all of the loss over the last 3 years in society, all of that was okay. Move to the next page. Every day, move to the next page, and then move to the next book, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a process for sure. And people ask, well, how do I do that? How do I reconnect? Monumental times and moments are opportunities for us to shift the dynamic in our brain as we ruminate and we continue to dig deeply our neural networks, the neural pathways, the old habits, the old ways of thinking, the old thoughts. So I like to have people write the word beauty and put it on their refrigerator with a magnet. And then every day develop this new habit of doing one thing that brings them beauty and comfort. Maybe it's a sunset. Maybe it's buying flowers or a new plant. Maybe whatever it is, to break free of the old habits of isolation, despair, and hopelessness, and begin to bring back old ways of thinking and being where you enjoyed life, where there was beauty. And even though you think, it's not going to be the same without my person, it won't be the same. But it'll be different and new, and it'll remind you to keep getting in touch with beauty. Find beauty all around you.
In essence, what you're truly talking about is about creation. And, a lot of people say manifesting or giving it all these other words. Let's just use the word creating. I'm just going to create a moment in time where I can smile. I can create a moment in time where, my head doesn't hurt, or it doesn't feel heavy, or my shoulders, the weight on them doesn't seem to be pushing down. I think if you can find that moment in time, it frees a little piece off that's been holding you wherever or whatever. I know for myself, I would say to people, every day I would post, for a few years I did this, whatever I went outside and whatever was within 10 feet of my front door, I clicked a picture of it. And they'd say, but it's always the same thing. It's never the same thing. Never. And I think I have over 100,000 photos to prove that. So in essence, what we are truly saying is that time moves on, the world will move on, things are always being created, things are always changing. And if we can come to the point of change is what is really real, and that permanence is not, then that's when we can say, that's freeing, because we thought that the person that was going to be here that was supposed to be permanent, we thought that they're gone, that's permanent, when in essence what we're talking about is evolving through change. And that's when you learn to dance with, as I say, dance in the ethers with energy. That's what our real goal is, yes?
Indigenous alchemy is a term I really love in shamanism, and I thought, what does that mean? Indigenous alchemy, how do I get some of that? So indigenous means innate or inherent, and alchemy, transformation. So what if we as humans have an innate desire for transformation? And what if, while we're keeping everything still and stuck and refusing to move on, we're really creating more suffering for ourselves, instead of tapping into that energy and wisdom of the grieving process to transform our lives? Being stuck really doesn't come natural to us. It takes a lot of effort. And so moving on and grasping and changing and finding that energy that we know is available to us in marriages and with parenthood. We know that's life-transforming occurrences that have energy, and so does grief and grieving and loss. If we can look at it and find it and see that we are inherently hardwired for transformation, it puts it in just a different perspective. And when we change our perspective, everything changes.
You know, I think also, too, if we take the word, Karen, grief, and we say it's a process, and we take the word loss as today, and we say it's all going to transform in energy. That's exactly what you're saying. Because sometimes we get so stuck with the words, and we have to remember, and I used to do this all the time. I would say to myself, who's talking? To myself, who's talking?
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? And do I choose that for today? Sometimes I think even those of us who say, well, we've done a lot of work, we're in this energy field, this is the work we do, blah, blah. Or as people say, I'm spiritually awoken, or others will say I'm not, and I don't know what that means. In essence, all we're saying is acceptance, awareness, and then wait. And when you wait, the next second will take you into the next space and time. I think the fight is what humans have always done for eons. And perhaps maybe, that in this century we might get through that. Fighting against something. You fight against everyone and everything to be able to validate self. That's an old paradigm. But we have to remember it's not just you who's got the issue, or you who has the process, or you who's doing whatever and it's affecting only you. It's the everything out there.
Yeah.
And if we could see that if it's everybody's fighting something on a different level, everybody's struggling on a different level, and take it out as it's the story out there, it's the human experience out there, and then can take yourself back to saying, I am source energy, and just sit in that essence, you will start to become that. You don't have to engage in that out there all the time. And you could start to find those mornings of peace, or that second of peace, or whatever that might be, and say, yes, that's all out there. That absolutely is all out there. But start to see in your mind's eye that it is out there. And you can, raise yourself up, or you can go around a corner, or you can just sit in the moment of it and say, it's out there. It's the human story. But we aren't the human story, when we really come down to it, You and I mean, even in your book, you really share that. It's like that's that fine thread through your book. It's about being able to say, I'm separate from the human story. The human story will get me wound up in all kinds of messes forever. Yeah, but I can understand I go through it, but it's there, right?
Right. And I love the way you talk about sit and find that place within us that is not that out there. Right. And to really ask ourselves the big questions in life. And it doesn't have to be that you're sitting on a meditation cushion for 8 hours a day. Right. And maybe that's the way you do it and that works for you. But it can be just sitting very quietly for 5 minutes. And just for 5 minutes, letting yourself ask the big questions like, who are you judging? Who's judging you? What are the stories you're telling yourself? What roles are you attached to? I mean, maybe even being attached to the role of grieving mother. That becomes a really heavy role. Or widow, or widower, or divorcee, or lost a business, failed business. So many, many roles that we carry that are really, really heavy. And if we can look at those and begin the process of releasing them so that we are not, like you say, we're not out there. We're not defined by out there. We are who we are inside. And so it's that process.
Do you think, Karen, though, when we sit in that moment in time and we're asking the questions and those answers are coming to us, that in essence is a sense of judgment because it is a sense of validating or it is a sense of identity. So I think that what people will say, well, how long does this last or whatever? And I always say, I don't know. You just let me know. And what happens is you'll sit and nothing will come. You will sit and nothing will show up. You will sit and your mind will just clear. That's when you're really, truly in the alchemic kind of energy form of being able to be moving through. And that's what we're really looking for, is that sense of that. Because if we keep connecting to the stories, we're still going to be stuck in the words and the stories, right?
Well, that's so true, but we have to first find them within ourselves and allow ourselves to see them, name it, claim it, release it. So we want to name it, the story, and say, okay, that's living in me. And then I want to take it to the fire, to a candle, and let the smoke clear it with the intention of releasing it. We can't release something we are not looking at, and we're hiding in the shadow, and we're fearful of facing. I'll look at that tomorrow. I don't want to deal with that now, those kind of things. We want to actually name them. And in this process, 16 ways of looking at where we're stuck and what stories are holding us down and what judgments are holding us down, and with the intention of releasing and opening our hearts for new ways and information to come in. It's that process that we need to really, really clear to get at the basis. I always say, if there's a big boulder, you can't shove the boulder and it rolls away all at once. Mostly you have to dig around it a little bit. Let's dig the dirt around, so we're going to loosen it up so that it eventually can roll away.
Do you think also, too, Karen, in closing, we could talk about that a lot of people are starting to notice and looking back at their life in retrospect and saying, I've had the tools all along, I just didn't know about it, or I've been in this place and time before, and they have a sense of it. And also, you're saying, ooh, I do have eyes wide open, and you start accelerating in the process of seeing, feeling, awareness, and moving through. Do you think that that's also too starting to happen more rapidly?
Yeah, I think there's a process of so much coming in and so much change, and part of it is being part of this global community, which, we weren't before as much, and it's just getting to be more and more connections, more and faster connections. And we see with COVID, we're part of a global community. This is a pandemic, and it's pan culture and pan everything, So I think people are waking up and seeing things a little bit differently. It's a different perspective on everything. And we may even think, wow, I feel like I've had several incarnations within the same lifetime. I know I certainly feel like I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we also start to process a lot of past lives and a lot of transgressions, and a lot of that old, antiquated stuff comes up. If you look, ancestral medicine is really big now, a lot of let's heal our lineages. And a lot of the people in the decades of you and I are in are really getting into this because they believe that they are in that space and time for their purpose. Their mission in life might have been nothing that they've done over the past 60, 70, 80 years. It might be a moment in time where they just helped heal the lineages and poof, then they're gone, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I certainly, as a shaman, do a lot of that kind of work and help people clear ancestral, even things that live in our DNA and our DNA. Right. So clearing these lines is so important. Epigenetics. So much good science has come along that confirming what shamans and ancients knew. Quantum physics, epigenetics, so many things that we have now in our tool bags to change life and change the way we live.
I think, Karen, that what we're truly talking about when you say living, grieving, it's really that grieving is the process by which you explore. Living is also, too, a process by which you explore, because there is an ebb and flow in the life, and we think that we don't want to touch and feel the hard parts. We want to stay in a certain space. When in essence, energy, it has to flow all the way around the circle. If you grow a plant, it has its full cycle, and you can watch the entire cycle, and then you say, oh, cool. You don't go outside and mourn your tomato plants when they die. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or when you're
maybe we might sometimes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we gather that, or gathering. We get mad at because when we slice a tomato, we let seeds go down the drain by mistake. We have to realize that it's all the process within our moment in time, and that we weren't meant to encapsulate, capture, or hold on to something to keep recreating it. We look at medicine these days, I've been in medicine over 5 decades now, and it's all about presenting a theory, and then proving it, and then it's how you can keep reproducing it all the time to become a factor of truth or whatever. But in essence, all of that is truly an energy process, and it too takes on an evolution of its own. And I think if we could be free of the idea of that and know that we are all here for a purpose. You know, there was one thing I've always said, and this is the last I'll say on it, is that I look back and think about all the hard times or the hard people in our lives, or anger, grief or shock or whatever it might be in our past. And if we could look back and look at every single second and say, thank you so much for being my co-pilot in life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was such a rock on. I am so glad that we had that divorce. I am so excited that I had the devastating disease. I am so thrilled that whatever happened there, you were there, we were together. Because right then, you are giving validation to whatever happened without, adding some more blankets on your, so to speak, story, right?
Right, and gratitude changes everything. The practice of gratitude. Once you can say thank you to all the things that have happened, you're truly free from them. Until you can say thank you and get the lessons and the gifts, even if the lesson is how not to do something, how I don't want to be like you, even if that's the lesson, it's once you get the lesson and the gifts, you're truly free.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting challenge these days, Karen. We're ebbing and flowing so much that I think, now I've got the disconnect. We have so much ebbing and flowing these days. I think the idea is that we are kind of in a state of, bombarding each other because we quite haven't all been flowing together. So I think your book, Living Grieving, is truly about how to finesse a process that we're experiencing, yes? Yeah, thank you. That's exactly it. And to realize that it's a process. It's not a one and done, and there's no time. You have your own time, sacred time, to go through the process in your own way. Karen, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? Sure. You can find me at marianne-pestana.net and at the Four Winds website. I'm also there, one of the teachers, so you can contact me in either place. And my book is on Amazon. So Living Grieving, you can just look up Living Grieving or Karen Johnson and you'll go right to it. Very good. Well, Karen, it was such a pleasure to have you with us here today. So many people have so many different ways of seeing things or feeling things or sensing things, and their stories and the words that we shared today and inspiration, and even in our stories that we shared, will truly help others say, you know what, I got this. I'm okay. This is something I can work with. It's something that I can see. I can have a different perspective and to be free to do that. So I thank you so much for sharing the story today. Well, thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to have you. If you'd like to find out more information about Karen Johnson, again, her book is Living Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss, please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And it is about being able to say whatever it is, sit still for a second, something, someone, or a process will come to you to help you, guide you along the way. And you know what? Even guides get tired, and sometimes you need a different one. So no worries. It's all okay. Just reach out, ask for help, ask for guidance. Perhaps maybe your guidance is just sitting still and eating lunch today. Whatever it is, be well, be safe. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr.jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.